Hello, once more, and welcome back to the channel, back on YouTube. Here doing another 2024 Big Ten prediction video, week 12. Getting ready to go at it. Last week, 5-1 record puts me with a personal season record of 82 and 28 going into this week. And I want to also give a big thank you to all you subscribers out there, anyone who watches all these videos. And tell you, thank you very much for watching, because I finally reached 300,000 views, and I couldn't have done it without any of you, without you, the viewers, who are subscribed, who are not subscribed. So thank you to everyone who has done that. As we get into the Big Ten predictions, once again, 5-1 last week in week 11, 82 and 28 personal season record. Let's get into it. Week 12. Start out tomorrow night, Friday night again, the Big Ten, Washington, UCLA. Washington's final home game, their senior night, tomorrow night, against the UCLA Bruins. Both these two teams have had exposure playing in night games this year in the Big Ten, their first year. UCLA just a game under 500. Washington, they've had a struggle season as well, their first year in the Big Ten, with the new conference having to travel to East Coast games, and also having to play teams in that they're not used to playing. And look at this matchup on paper. Washington playing at home against UCLA. UCLA with 4 wins and 5 losses. Washington is about the same almost. And look at these two teams on paper, and they're just trying to figure out what to do. Washington coming off a 35-6 loss at Penn State last weekend. Under the lights, should be an interesting one to see here on paper overall. I'm going to take Washington playing at home, their final home game of the season, to get a win here to move forward. So give the Huskies a win here for me on this one, as I do think they snapped that 35 after losing 35-6 last week. As I do think they get a win here this week against the UCLA Bruins. Moving on, game number 2. Game number 2, the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Northwestern Wildcats on Saturday, coming up at 12 o'clock from Wrigley Field, a game on the Big Ten Network between these two teams, Northwestern and Ohio State, two teams coming in. Ohio State, number 2 team in the country with 1 loss. Only loss was to Oregon, that are number 2 team ranking in the country behind number 1 Oregon. Talking about number 1 Oregon here in a moment. But looking at this matchup on paper, Northwestern, they've had a year this year where they've struggled, and they've struggled to play good games and win and get wins. For Ohio State, their only loss to Oregon. This one should be a big game, playing on a neutral site game at Wrigley Field. Northwestern's other home this year, after playing all their home games at their their stadium that's on the lakefront, that was pretty much a practice field. Looking at this matchup, Ohio State playing at Wrigley Field against Northwestern should be an interesting game to see. I think Ohio State is going to take control of business, but I think it's going to be hard because last year it was hard for Iowa against Northwestern to get a 10-7 win at Wrigley Field. For Ohio State, I think it might be a little bit easier, but I think it might be a little interesting to see how they do playing on a field that's a baseball field. So we'll see what happens. But I do think Ohio State will get a win here in this one and stay ranked number 2, possibly going into next to week number 13. Get the Buckeyes a win here in this one. Our next matchup, Michigan State. They're traveling to Champaign, Illinois to play the Illinois Fighting Illini. Illinois coming in after playing last week. Illinois coming in off a bye week last week. Michigan State, they're coming off a bye week as well. Looking at the matchup, Illinois, Michigan State. Michigan State has had a year struggle. Illinois has got 6 wins. They're bowl eligible, but they've recently fallen behind lately with multiple wins. Going into this week with a 25-17 loss to Minnesota. And also previously, before that, they lost 38-9 again on the road at Oregon, and then beat Michigan 21-7. So their last 2 games before the bye week was losses for Illinois, unfortunately, coming in. But coming into this matchup, they look like they're a better team. Michigan State's coming off some surprising wins. They beat Iowa at home on their homecoming game. They beat other teams as well. Overall, looking at Illinois, they're a team that I think that can improve. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be improved off the bye week after a 2-game losing streak. I think they snapped that losing streak against Michigan State here, playing at home, get a win. So I'll give Illinois the win here for me on this one here on Saturday, as I do think Illinois gets the win against Michigan State. Moving on. Moving on, next matchup, Penn State traveling to Purdue this weekend. Purdue, one of those teams, they're at the bottom of the Big Ten this year. Unfortunately, a bad season. Penn State, though, On the other hand, they're coming in with a loss, only lost to Ohio State this year. They're still in the top five, and they're still a team that's in the Big Ten. One of the many teams in the Big Ten that's coming in. They come off a 3-5-6 win against Washington last weekend, and they're coming into this one against Purdue, a team that lost 45-0 to Ohio State. For Purdue, it's going to be another abysmal game this week, going up against Penn State after losing 45-0 against Ohio State. I think it's going to be another one of those weeks where Purdue gives up 30 or more. But do they get points this time? I think Purdue at least gets points this time. Not sure whether it's going to be a field goal, multiple field goals, or a touchdown, but we'll see. But for me, give me Penn State the win here in this one here on Saturday, as I do think they get the win to continue their streak and momentum after losing to Ohio State a few weeks ago. Moving on from this one. Next matchup, we have Nebraska. The Cornhuskers, they have to travel out west. They're the next team to travel out west to USC, to Southern California, and take on the Trojans of USC. USC coming off a bye week. Coming off a bye week for USC for the Trojans. They last game out there, they played a pretty interesting one a few weeks ago. They lost 26-21 to Washington a few weeks ago, and before that, USC 142-20 against Rutgers in week 9. So USC in their last 1-1 record of the last few games. Coming out, another team coming off bye week, Nebraska. They're coming off a bye week as well after losing to UCLA at home. Surprisingly, and UCLA, they're hot right now, but I did say they were going to lose earlier. But looking at this Nebraska team, they're coming off a streak where they lost to UCLA 27-20, and then before that, they lost to Ohio State 21-17 in a close game against the Buckeyes on the road. And for Nebraska, they're one of those teams this year. They're having a rough season. They're trying to figure out who they are with their young quarterback or freshman quarterback. And for USC, they're one of those teams, first year in the Big Ten, one of those teams, just like Washington and UCLA, that are struggling. The only team that's having a good year is Oregon. We'll talk about them in a moment. But I think this one's the game for USC to bounce back and get into the win column again. And for Nebraska as well, potentially as well, to bounce back and get a win column. I like USC, though, playing at home this weekend against Nebraska, though. It's going to be the Trojans here in this one on Saturday. Next up. It is Maryland at Rutgers. Rutgers making their way down south to Maryland. Maryland coming in. Play Rutgers this week. Rutgers coming off a 26-19 win against Minnesota last week. For Maryland, they're coming off a 39-18 loss to Oregon on the road. Another team that had to travel out west and lost last week. There were two of those last week with Maryland and Iowa both traveling out west and losing, by the way. And looking at this is one of those two teams that have been in the Big Ten since 2014 and in their 7th year in the Big Ten. And it's one of those matchups you could kind of question and be like, is this a rivalry? Is it not a rivalry? Maryland and Rutgers, they're new Big Ten teams, only 7 years in the conference, and they played each other every year since joining the Big Ten. You could technically say this is a Big Ten conference rivalry game, but it's not really a rivalry. It's a regional rivalry game, you could say. And in the past, these two teams have played games where Maryland has had a good game and won, and Rutgers has had a few games and won as well. You look at these two teams, they're both struggling this season in the Big Ten. Rutgers started out good, Maryland started out bad, but you look at it at the end of the day, and both teams are two teams that are trying to play good and win games. And this matchup with Maryland playing at home, I kind of like Maryland at this one, playing at home this week against Rutgers, to come back off coming off 39-18 loss to Oregon. I kind of like Maryland this one here, playing at home against Rutgers. Rutgers did win 26-19 against Minnesota last week. I do like Maryland a little bit more in this one. So give me Maryland for the win here in this one on Saturday. Moving on to our last game of the day. The number 1 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks, the only Big Ten team that's had a good success in their first year of the conference. They're going to Madison, Wisconsin Saturday night in primetime on NBC, which should be a fun one to see. Unfortunately, I'll be working, so I won't be able to watch. But I'll be keeping track of this one because this one's going to be a fun one to see on Saturday night. Number 1 Oregon against Wisconsin. Wisconsin, a team that has struggled this year. Oregon, on the hand, number 1 team in the country, unbeaten still. When is Oregon going to lose? That's the big question. How long is it going to take for them to lose? Remember when they joined the conference Big Ten Media Days, they had that duck floating in the river in Indianapolis because they wanted to prove that they belonged, and they've proved that they can belong. But this one for them going to Wisconsin, the last number 1 team to go into Wisconsin under the lights and get beat. They have to go back to 2010. Ohio State, they got beat by Wisconsin. It's like it was like the second or third week in a row that a number 1 team in the country got beat way back in 2010. Because Missouri beat Oklahoma that year as the number 1 team. There was a kickoff return to start the game. And Wisconsin beat Ohio State that year as well in 2010 as well on a kickoff return to start the game as well. And that's how the number 1 team went down. Kickoff returns and they opened the game back in 2010 between Wisconsin and Ohio State and Missouri and Oklahoma multiple weeks in a row. But looking at this game, Wisconsin, they can upset teams when they play good. For Oregon, it's going to be an environment they've never been to. I think it's going to be one of those games that's going to be interesting to see on paper. And 2, it's going to be about which team can make the least amount of mistakes in a night game in Madison, Wisconsin. For this one, I think Oregon's going to come away with a win, but I think they barely get it done. I think it's going to be close in this one, but we will find out and see. We will find out and see what happens this week. And give me Oregon, the Ducks, in this game on Saturday night in a close one under the lights in primetime. That being said, that is Week 12 Big Ten predictions. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you next week back here on Thursday, Week 13. Please remember to watch, like, subscribe, and tell your friends as well to do the same if they haven't done so yet already. Also, don't forget to hit that notification button below so you know when there's a new video on the channel. With that being said, have a good day, stay safe, and peace out. I'll see you right back here next Thursday in the Week 13 Big Ten prediction video. See you then, have a good day, stay safe, everyone, and peace out. See you next week. Bye.